If you understand the seriousness of the nature of what the other side did, none of it was happenstance. This was all planned, orchestrated, and was planned a long time ago. I would also tell you there are some new aspects to it because they're hidden from the open source information that most of us are privy to. But there are some parts that have been well known, but not used in the public domain. Let me refer to something called PsyCop. Psy standing for psychological and op standing for operations. Some people say psychops. I'm going to read to you the military Department of Defense definition. It's not long, but where I use the word foreign audience, I want you to substitute the word Republican or conservative, whichever one you'd like. Here's what it says. Psychological operations, or PsyCop, are intended to convey selected information and indicators to foreign audiences, again, conservative audiences, to influence their emotions, motives, objective reasoning, and ultimately the behavior of foreign governments. Read Trump administration. Organizations, groups, and individuals. The purpose of psychological operations is to induce or reinforce attitudes or behaviors favorable to the originator's objectives. That is precisely what we saw going on in the media. Some people call it propaganda. But this is directly taken from the Department of Defense definition. Now, a component of PsyCops is information operations, and that is the media. So just to put all that into context, so that people can get a sense of just how diabolical and purposeful all of it during Trump's first term was purposeful. Another point, I just mentioned that some of the efforts being used by the other side were clandestine or hidden from public view. One very important effort that people were working on back then to bring to the attention of the Trump administration was an information technology capability that operates via the internet called the Hammer, and an application that works with the Hammer called Scorecard. Hammer does a lot of things, including calling up computers and downloading files without a user ever knowing it. But the part I want to emphasize to you today is Scorecard, because it was designed with the express purpose of changing vote totals on the fly. Meanwhile, not preloaded anywhere in a computer, but actually targeting the reporting of precinct data upward at the state level over the internet. There's no way to air gape it at this point. This is the way data is transmitted. Most of us use the internet. When the packets are recognized, and the packets are little bits of information that make up a report of voting between two candidates or a group of candidates, it can be defined as small, large, whatever. The packets that make up that transmission over the internet can be opened, looked at, recognized for who they're going to and what they contain. The data inside each packet can be switched. It can be changed in microseconds, zipped back up, so to speak. Imagine putting a jacket on and zipping it up and sending it on its way, so that the receiver never really perceives a delay. There's always a little delay. Somebody sends you an email. It takes a few seconds before it gets to your computer, so nobody's the wiser. But the data has been changed. Scorecard works based on an algorithm that needs a 3% or less disparity or difference between two candidates. So that if there is a 20-point difference or a 10-point difference, it's not going to function. Why? The designer of this did not want it to be obvious. If you go around instantaneously changing totals from 10% to nothing, or even losing, people are going to notice. They're going to notice that and say, what the heck is going on? But if I open that window to just a little bit, a 3% difference, then any change that comes in is more acceptable to observers and less suspect, if you will. This is the way Scorecard works. Scorecard worked in Georgia, in Nevada, in a number of those states, and it's not the only tool that was being used. Another one was that fake Lagoon authorities were implemented in the counting control systems, which were Windows computers, where the votes were counted, so that a remote user having the right password could log on and change data that way as well. What I'm going to say is, ballots were being dropped off at the post office and backdated to 3 November, even though they arrived on 4 November. A lot of that ballot manipulation was going on, but this, the computer manipulations, was the less visible aspect that I want people to be aware of. It is extremely powerful, and it needs to be stopped. The good news is it records data, and we managed to bust this open with the help of the administration and the tools of some agencies. We found the evidence that votes were changed. So it was another great boon to the team of lawyers. And finally, I'd like to read to you some wisdom that I came across earlier today by Dick Morris, who happened to show up on Newsmax. I ran across an article, by the way, for those of you who do not know, Dick Morris is a former advisor for former President Bill Clinton. He appeared on Newsmax, on our side, so to speak. And he reminded us of this important constitutional fact. The people who are in charge of elections are not governors. They're not even secretaries of states. Secretaries of states are just supposed to carry out election law in a state. The actual laws are defined and laid out and implemented by the legislature of each state. I'm going to read to you what he suggested, an action point, and I just think it's very clever and it's very important that you hear it. Here it is. We have to move the fight from the executive branch of the states to the legislative branch of the states. In all of these 4 key battleground states, and he lists North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, there are Democratic governors interfering in the process. But both houses of the legislature in those states are Republican. Those guys need to wake up. And if you live in those states, you need to call your state representative and your state senator, not federal, but state, and say, get on the ball. Get your butts in gear. Get to the state capitol, demand that the legislature be called into session, and take over the counting process in your state for which you are ultimately responsible.